evening, everybody.
Please welcome Governor Bruce Christie.
Braving the track fight, which I understand, and I was in an accident that happened. That's one for, blocks of the roads here, so we appreciate y'all coming. Appreciate braving the traffic to do it. Look, the way I like to do this stuff is to make sure that we spend the bulk of our time on be answering your questions. And we're actually going to do it in a way that's unusual for candidates. I'm going to actually answer your questions. And if you watch the debate last Wednesday night, I think you would conclude that some of my adversaries in this race either have a hearing problem or a speaking problem, because questions get asked that are pretty direct, and whether you like them or not, your job is to try to answer them, I think, the best way you can. If you don't like the question, you always have the option of saying, I don't like the question, but here's the answer. So I want to try to answer as many of your questions tonight as we can, and appreciate you being here. First thing I want to say tonight is that, I think the biggest issue in this race, before we get to any specifics, is character. Character. And the reason it's character is because, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of issues today. I'm sure we'll talk about immigration and the border. I'm sure we'll talk about taxes and the awful debt that we have in this country. I'm sure we'll talk about education, and we'll talk about the drug abuse problem, the drug overdose deaths in this country, and what's going on there. And I'm sure we're going to talk about law and order and crime that's happening across our country. It's really a sickening me, and I'm sure it's sickening you too. But those are the issues that are the issues of today. Some of them are around for a long time, some of them are relatively new. But the one thing I know for sure is that we're never going to be able to anticipate every issue the next president is going to see. I'm confident, because I was there in 2016, no one asked us, what would you do if the country were inundated by a once-in-a-100-year pandemic? And how would you react to all the different decisions that you're going to have to make to try to protect the lives of the people in this country? And, I was named United States Attorney in New Jersey by President Bush on September 10th, 2001. Well, the job that I accepted that day became significantly different the next day. And no one asked George W. Bush or Al Gore in that race, what would you do if 11 terrorists hijacked 4 767s filled with jet fuel, ran 2 of them into the World Trade Center towers, 1 of them into the Pentagon, and sent another one to the Capitol? But the reason on that day I felt some sense of comfort by the end of the day was because I watched George W. Bush address the country from the Oval Office, and I recognized once again his character. That whether or not I was going to agree with everything he did or didn't, that I knew that he would do what he thought was best for the country in his heart and in his head, and he could execute on it. And that he's a good man who would make the best decisions he could. And so the reason I say character is most important first is because of all those examples, just those 2 that were world-changing, 9/11 and COVID, and how we get through those things, how well we get through those things, are going to be determined by the character of the person who sits in that chair, how they make decisions, who they have around them, who they listen to, what they count on to make those calls. Look, I've done that. For 8 years as governor of New Jersey, I did it in a pretty tough place for a Republican, for sure. Right? We haven't elected a Republican to the United States Senate in New Jersey in 50 years. 1972. I was 10 years old the last time we did that. And so it's a tough place for a Republican. But I got elected twice there, even though the legislature was Democrat all 8 years that I was governor. And not by a little. 25-15 in the Senate, 48-32 in the lower house. Big gaps. So it wasn't like if I turned 1 or 2 votes, I'm okay. What you've got to figure out how to do is how to use your personality, your ability, your experience to move people who don't want to move closer to where you are, and then get a good deal for the people who elected you. And that's what I did for 8 years. The president of the Senate when I was there was a guy named Steve Sweeney. He is president of the Iron Workers Union. Imagine. That's a shy and retiring guy to deal with on the Democratic side, a union leader. But we made things work. And it's because, in the end, I made a deal with him. And I told him, if I give you my word, I will keep it. And in return, I expect you to keep yours. Even if the politics turn a little bit differently. As we saw down in Washington a couple of days ago, politics can turn pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, people forget the promises they made. And when we're in that kind of tumult, what you need is someone in the Oval Office who can bring a sense of calm and stability and certainty to all these other folks. So that's why I say character is really important. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that too during your questions. Second, on immigration and the border. Look, if you watched the debate last week, you heard everybody say on that stage, we're going to be stronger on the border. Well, that's great. Question is how, right? I mean, anybody, you go up to anybody watching what's going on right now, they say, we'd like to be stronger at the border. Great. Let me make you understand the scope of the problem. And it's hard to tell how big it is, even when you're seeing some video on TV. Over the last 11 months, the average number of apprehensions at the border a month are 200,000 a month. Those are the people who are apprehended. Now, you heard people say on the stage this week, we're going to apprehend them, we're going to hold them, and then we're going to send them back right away. Let me be the one to tell you the truth. The truth is, you know how many beds we have to hold these people? 38,000 total. 38,000. We're apprehending 200,000 a month. We're going to hold them and then send them back, okay? How long does it take to make the determination as to whether or not they have a political asylum claim or not? Are we ready? 4 years. 4 years. Someone who gets apprehended at the border today gets a notice to appear in immigration court in 4 years. And we have no place to keep them. So, I'd like to double the number of beds that we have to keep people housed. Okay, but that's not going to happen overnight. Not going to build another 40,000 beds in 2 months. And so let's say it takes 6 months or 8 months. Remember, 200,000 a month. This is the problem about the president, the former president, President Trump, not building the wall. He built 52 miles of new wall in 4 years. Now, I was on that stage in 2016. He said he's going to be, remember, he's a builder. He was going to build a big, beautiful wall across the entire border of Mexico, and Mexico was going to pay for it, right? Now, I have to tell you something. I knew that was BS when he was saying it. But he's convincing, and he convinced a lot of people. 52 miles of new wall. You know what that means? He'd only need another 110 years as president. At that pace to finish the entire wall. And he said something extraordinary the other day. When he was pushed on this, he said, well, come on. How did you expect me to get another government to pay for a wall that's on our side of the border? Like, you know, you got to give him credit for this. He'll say anything. with a straight face and trying to make you think you're crazy for saying, wait, but you told us that's what you were gonna do. Like, we didn't make that up, you did. My point to you bringing that up is, we gotta stop with the easy answers to this, okay? We need to triple the number of immigration judges we have, so that it doesn't take 4 years for someone to get an asylum determination. We need to add 10,000 Customs and Border Patrol officers to be able to make sure we apprehend people efficiently. And we need to double the number of beds that we have in order to retain the people we need to retain. That all is gonna take at least a year to get done, at least. And in the interim, what do? Well, I signed an executive order to send National Guard troops to the border to work with Customs and Border Patrol folks, predominantly to stop, as much as we could, the inflow of fentanyl. Because, last year we had 110,000 Americans die of an overdose in this country. It is now the leading killer among young men, 18 to 34. Think about that. It's not car accidents. It's drug overdoses. And so we're not gonna stop all of it that comes in, but we can slow it down a bit too. And we need a president who's gonna say, you're not staying. If you come, and you come in legally, you're not staying. Unlike Joe Biden, who has said, sure, everybody come over. And now today, Joe Biden says, I think I'm gonna start building some more walls.
Yes.
Right? Look, he and I went to the same college, many years apart. We went to the same place. I have a feeling he was in the slower classes, okay? Because it takes him a while to figure this stuff out. But he created the worsening of this problem during the campaign 3 years ago when he said, our border shouldn't be treated like that, people shouldn't be treated like that. Well, here's what he's forgotten. And I think Trump has forgotten and Obama forgot too. The words of the American president matter. People are listening. And they believe you. You're the president of the United States of America. So Barack Obama forgot about that when he told all of us, if you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health plan, you can keep it. We all remember that was the first big lie of the last 15 years. Obamacare. Donald Trump told us he was gonna build the big, beautiful wall, and he didn't do that. And there are other stuff with him too. He also said he was gonna balance the budget in 4 years. He's a businessman. A businessman can balance the budget in 4 years. In 4 years, you know what he did? He had $7.8 trillion to the national debt. $7.8 trillion. We have 33 trillion now total. When he left, we had 28 trillion. That means he accounted for more than 25% of the entirety of our national debt from 1776 to 2020. Think about that. Words matter. And now Joe Biden tells all these folks, well, the border's gonna be open, don't you worry, everybody can come, we want everybody. And he thought they weren't gonna actually show up. And they're showing up. They're walking from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. Let me tell you why part of that is good news. People still wanna come here. This is still the greatest country in the world that provides the greatest freedom and the greatest opportunity. And I'm happy that people wanna come here. Because we're never gonna grow America without new people coming in. But they gotta come in legally. They gotta come in the right way. And that's the last piece of this. We need to change the immigration system so that we have merit-based immigration. We have 6 million open jobs in this country right now, in this economy. We have 6 million jobs that employers can't fill. We're never, and you know what that means? It means that those are jobs that are open, they're advertised, people know about them. That means those are jobs that Americans either can't do or won't do. Okay. How do we grow the economy? We've got to grow the economy by filling those jobs. Getting those people to pay taxes, buy houses, rent apartments, buy cars, do all the things that we do when we have a job and we're making some money and we're successful. And they're not taking government assistance at the same time too. It's a twofer, guys. It's a twofer. They're paying in and not taking out. So I want to have a system that says where are the industries where those 6 million jobs are. And if you have the skills and the ability to do that work, come in. We'll give you a work visa, you come and work, you register, you pay your taxes, and as you go through the normal course of working here, like anybody else with a green card or that kind of option, you eventually can work to become a citizen. But it's gonna take you a lot of years. And in the meantime, we're gonna let you work and earn a living, as long as you pay your taxes and don't break the law. We gotta be real about this. I've heard Governor DeSantis say he's gonna shoot him stone cold dead at the border. Now look, you know, some people may like that. It's not happening. No president, he says he's gonna invade Mexico. Really? This is the guy who doesn't want us to send arms to Ukraine because he doesn't want to be involved in war. But he's gonna send the army into Mexico. Come on, guys. That's like saying we're gonna build a big, beautiful wall across the entire border and Mexico's gonna pay for it. It sounds good in the debate, it's never going to happen. These guys from Florida sometimes. You know, it's hot down there, it's humid, get yourself all worked up, you're sweating, you're angry, because he looks a little angry, doesn't he? Like you look at Ron looks a little angry. And every once in a while, someone must see his smile, and then he has that kind of odd smile. And you go like, that's an angry guy who's trying to act happy. And he's angry, but just because he's angry doesn't mean we should send the army to Mexico. Let's remember something, we live in the greatest neighborhood in the world. You wanna live in Europe right now? With Putin marching from east to west? You wanna live in Asia, be a neighbor of China? I think so. How about a neighbor of North Korea? The Middle East, not so much. South America, not doing well right now. We live in the greatest neighborhood in the world. We don't wake up every morning worrying that, you know, Canada might invade. Right? They're good. They like us. And the Mexican government, they're always trying to negotiate with us and they're trying to get a better deal. But remember something, they are our biggest trading partners in the world. So this is a good neighborhood. So let's not be shooting people stone cold dead or sending the army over the border. Okay? Want to go after the drug cartels? Me too. Let's use intelligence to do it. Let's be smart about it. Let's use the people at the Drug Enforcement Administration. Let's use the CIA and others to be able to find out where those folks are. We can go take care of them then, quietly, smartly. You go over and you send them a message. Look at it. But we're not doing that stuff now because Joe Biden doesn't think that way. We need to send a strong message, but you need a strong president to do it, and not one that just blusters. We've had blustering. You know, posting stuff on Twitter doesn't get the wall built. And it certainly doesn't get Mexico to write a check. Right? So on immigration, there are limits to what we can do. But we can do all of that stuff over the course of time, and we should. Because it will also send a message to all those other folks. If we give them a way to come to the country legally, in an orderly, smart way that fills our economic needs, they're not going to be trying to get in illegally. Some still will. But boy, if we took that number down from 200,000 a month and we halved it, or we cut it by 2/3, then we can manage the situation. Right now, it's unmanageable. And how do you like all these mayors and governors around the country on the Democratic side who said, I'm a sanctuary city, I'm a sanctuary state. Man, that was great when no one was coming. Now that everybody's coming, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I saw the mayor of New York the other day say, there's no more room in New York. I was like, what the hell happened? He said, everybody can come here. The governor of New York, everyone can come here. The governor of New Jersey, my successor, said, everybody come to New Jersey. And they said, we're going to open up a migrant camp in Atlantic City. And he went, oh, no, not there. Not there. Any place? He's not volunteering any place. All of these fakes, these phonies, who play to the grandstand on that issue to try to make us look heartless. Now the chickens are coming home to roost, as they say, and they're not too proud of having all those chickens there. So we've got to stop, and this is why Forums like this are so important where you can talk to folks in New Hampshire one-on-one. Because you guys are gonna decide. You're gonna decide whether you reward that kind of BS anymore. Or whether you're gonna vote for someone who's gonna tell it to you straight. I'm not gonna tell you I'm gonna fix the immigration problem on my second day on the job. And I'm not gonna tell you that I'm gonna have somebody else pay for the fix. We're gonna pay for it. But it'll be our fix. And we'll do it the right way. I'll end with law and order. Because you hear everybody talk about law and order. Law and order only works if it applies to everyone. Everyone. If we don't make sure the law applies to everyone, then everybody else is going to say, well, it doesn't apply to her. How come it applies to me? He's not going to jail. Why should I go to jail? He's getting away with this. Why shouldn't I try to do something for myself or my family? Law and order has to apply equally. I remember when I became U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, it's the 5th largest office in the country, and John Ashcroft was the Attorney General. And right before I took the oath of office for that job, he said to me, I want you to remember that the most important job every day is to enforce the law without fear, without favor, and without partisanship. And if you do that every day, you're going to do great at this job. And if you don't do that every day, I'm going to fire you. It was literally the last thing he said to me before I left his office. And it never left my mind. These 7 years I was there. I used to have the seal of the Department of Justice up in my office, and when I would swear in a new prosecutor, before I swore them in, I told them, you have one last test to pass. Read the seal. Now, there's also Latin on the seal. They always thought I meant the Latin. Do I have to read Latin? I said, no. Read the English. They said, Department of Justice. I said, okay, read it out loud again. They said, Department of Justice. I said, does it say Department of Prosecution? They said, no. I said, your job is to do justice every day. To make sure justice is done. That people in this country feel like people are equal before the law. That's what's made us different than every other country in the history of the world. Is that we're not a country of men and women in power. We're a country of laws. And we've lost that in 3 ways recently. Way number 1 is look at what's happening in our cities. I mean, I never thought I would live in America where people could walk into a Walgreens or a CVS and just pull stuff off the shelves, grab it around their arms, and walk out. And there are no ramifications for it. None. I don't know if you saw the video in Philadelphia the other night, where they went to an Apple store after it closed, smashed the windows, went in, took every iPhone they could grab until the idiots figured out that without the people in the iPhone store, you can't work the iPhone. So then what they did was they destroyed all the iPhones because they were mad. And then they went down the street to the Lululemon store and took every bit of exercise clothes they could get out of there. And police stood by and watched until finally they had had enough and they started arresting people. Why did they watch first? Because they're not getting supported by the prosecutors. They're tired of arresting people and having them turn around and come right back out 3 or 4 hours later. And I did this for a living. I know what happens when that happens. They laugh in the cop's face. And no police officer, no man or woman who puts that uniform on likes to be laughed at by a criminal. And after a while, they just say, well, why, you know, and they're getting sued and all the rest of it. Well, why should I put my neck on the line for this? We need to start enforcing the laws in our cities again against that kind of theft and that kind of violent crime. And if the prosecutors in those cities won't do it, as president, I'll make sure we do. I will tell my attorney general to have a different talk with the U.S. attorneys than the one I got. That talk will be the first thing you do is every major city in your district, you go in and you prosecute violent crime. We got plenty of room in federal prison to put these people in federal prison. And let me tell you, having done it, when you send them to federal prison, it's a whole different ballgame because there's no parole like there is in the state system. So they have to serve a minimum of 85% of their term. And if they don't behave when they're in jail, they serve 100%. Second, they don't get to go like around home. When you get prosecuted on the state level, you go to a state prison. So be near your home, so your friends, your family can come visit you. Federal system, you can wind up in Montana. You can wind up in Wyoming. You can wind up anywhere. And then your family come and visit you, and you're gone for a long time. Remember when I did a task force as U.S. attorney with local police in Camden, New Jersey, was then a pretty dangerous place. And we were taking guns, illegal guns off the street. And the guy got arrested selling guns. He got arrested by the Camden police officer, but there was a federal ATF agent with him. And so they put him in the car, and they drove past City Hall in Camden, which is where you would go get processed. And the guy was such an experienced criminal, he went, no, you passed the place, you're supposed to take me back there. And the police officer turned around and said, oh, no. See this guy sitting with me? He's a federal ATF agent. You're going to the federal courthouse, you're getting taken federally. The guy started to cry in the back of the police car, and he said to the two officers, tell me what I need to tell you. I'll do anything to avoid that. You want to straighten out the crime problem in the near term, you start doing that. And those criminals are not stupid. They know what they can get away with and what they can't, and when the new message comes down that you're doing federal time and you're leaving to go a long way away for a long time, they're going to stop doing it. We've seen this done across the country and other places. It can be done the right way, and we have to do it. But the other side of that equation is, when people who dress like me commit crimes, they need to be held to account too. We can't have a two-tiered system of justice, whether that two tiers is Republican and Democrat, or whether it's white collar and blue collar, or whether it's violent crime versus business crime or political crime. I used to say to my guys and women in my office, crime is crime. And anybody who does it needs to know we're going to come knocking on their door. And so the second instruction I give to the Attorney General is, I don't care what party someone belongs to. I don't care what job they do. They break the law, they need to go to jail. And the proof of that is, when I was U.S. Attorney, we did 130 political corruption prosecutions in 7 years. Republicans and Democrats. In fact, I put 10% of the state legislature in jail when I was U.S. Attorney. So 120 in the state legislature, I put 12 of them in jail. And then I became governor. You can imagine how much they're looking forward to me coming down to the state capitol to work with them after I put 10% of them in the can. But what people understood was, when I was running the show, the first two cases I did was against the African-American Republican mayor of Patterson, one of our larger cities. The second case I did was against the Republican frontrunner for the United States Senate. And one of the county chairmen, Republican county chairman, after we raided that guy's offices, everybody knew he was going down, called an old law partner of mine and said, what the hell is Chris doing? I thought he was one of us. And my old law partner said to him, you don't understand him. He's not one of us. He's got a job to do, he's gonna do it. He doesn't care who's on the other side of it. We've got to return to that, everybody. If that means Hunter Biden should go to jail. He lied on his application for a gun permit about his drug use. And under the federal law, that means a 10-year minimum jail sentence. I didn't make the law. Guess who made the law? Senator Joe Biden was the sponsor of that law. He thought it was a good idea then. And Hunter Biden, I don't see any way he gets out from under that. He did it. So now they finally brought the charge against him. That's good. And I think there are going to be other charges against him on tax and maybe on dealing with foreign governments. And that's all good. It should be done. And in my state, a guy that I chased for a little while but couldn't quite catch, Bob Menendez, When I went after him, he didn't have $500,000 in jackets in his house or gold bars. He was new. He just got to he was running for the United States Senate when we had an investigation on him. It's good that this Justice Department indicted him. He's the most powerful Democrat on foreign policy in the United States Senate. He's chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. It's going to start to push back on this idea that there's a two-tiered system of justice. They need to do that. If they need to do that, everybody, then they need to take care of Donald Trump too. Okay? I don't care who you are, whether you're president of the United States or a local county or elected official, if you have the public trust and you violate that public trust, then you need to be held to account for it. And we did it in New Jersey for 7 years. And you know what happened as a result of that? For years after that, you didn't see people taking envelopes of cash anymore. You know, I left that job in 2008. Took Bob Menendez another 15 years until he started piling up all that cash in his jackets. And I can guarantee you this, he wouldn't have done it when I was there. He wouldn't have. So law and order in this country has to work on both sides and for everybody for it to work. And the last piece of this is, after I give those 2 instructions to the Attorney General, I'm going to say to him or her, don't call me anymore on anything that's regarding a criminal investigation. I don't want to know. I don't want to hear about it. I shouldn't have anything to do with it. You're in charge. You make the decisions. Because a politician shouldn't be in the middle of that. When I was U.S. attorney, I used to laugh all the time about politicians who would talk about what was going on in our office. I used to love it because I knew they didn't know anything. They were just making it up, right? And I used to say to our guys all the time, the best part of this job is only we know what we know. But then when I became governor, and in my state, we don't elect the Attorney General. The governor appoints the Attorney General, like the president. And if you go to every one of my attorneys general, I had 4 of them during my 8 years, they will tell you they never once got a phone call from me about any criminal case that was going on in that office. Not once. And I had lots of opinions on it, believe me, because I'd done the work for 7 years myself. So as I watched things, I had opinions, but you're not saying anything. Because I didn't want them to ever think I was trying to interfere with them in any way. Let the chips fall where they may. And that's the way it has to work. If we don't restore that in this country, then we are no different than any other country in the world. And nobody else in this race knows how to do that like I do. Because I'm the only one on that stage left who's done it. Who's done it. We've tried a lot of different things in the last 15 years. We tried a guy who had been in the United States Senate for 2 years, and we made him president. That didn't work so well. Then we tried a guy who had never been elected to anything. He did a couple of things that were okay, but for the most part, it didn't go that well. And now we got a guy who's been there for 50 years. And he may have known some stuff before it, but I think he's forgotten much of it. And he doesn't, let's be honest, he doesn't have the energy, the stamina anymore to do it. Father Time catches up to everybody. And Mary Pat and I have known Joe Biden for 40 years. We met at the University of Delaware. And he used to come around to the football tailgates on Saturday and take beer from everybody and have a good time. He did. Walk around. Can I have a beer? Sure, Senator. Come on, have a beer. And he'd sit around, talk to everybody. He is a wonderfully nice guy. But he's past his sell-by date. It's over. It's over. And if his family had a conscience, they would tap on the shoulder and say, good job, Dad. It's time to go home. It's time for him to go on the beach in Delaware and enjoy the rest of his life. Instead, because they're all in the grift, the sister, the brother, the son, they're all in the grift. The minute he leaves, the grift ends. And by the way, Donald Trump's kid's on the grift too. When Jared and Ivanka leave the White House, what happens 6 months later? Jared gets $2 billion from the Saudis. $2 billion. Really? up to about 3 months ago, he had gotten it right when they left, over 2.5 years ago. And you know what? He hadn't invested a nickel of it, but he was getting fees on it every month. Not bad. They get a percentage, $2 billion every month. What did they do to get that? We gotta stop this stuff, everybody. We gotta stop it. You know, if you can't control your own family, how the hell can you run the United States? I'll make it really clear to you. No member of my family's making any money if I become president, off of me being president. They all have jobs now. They'll all do fine. They're working, they're good. Our kids are doing fine. One of them's still in college. We hope she'll do well too. But the other, all three are graduated, they're employed in jobs that have nothing to do with politics. One of them's baseball, one of them's at a marketing firm, and one of them's teaching. They have nothing to do with politics. And I tell you, they've watched me, they don't want to go anywhere near it. They're like, good, we'll do our thing. Have a good time, invite us to the White House for Christmas, we're good. We gotta stop this stuff. So there's a lot of other issues to talk about. I'm gonna stop and take your questions. But I want you to understand, in the end, that's why character is the most important thing. Every one of those issues we just talked about, immigration and law and order, political corruption, are all infused with character. If you have someone who shows you they have character, you may not agree with every decision. And I guarantee you, if you elect me, you won't agree with every decision I make. That I may think is best. And after 4 years, you want to kick me out, you've got the option. But you'll know that I made the decision I thought was right. Not the decision that was going to try to benefit me or my family or some other group of people that you don't even maybe know. So now we can talk about any other issue you want to talk about. Just raise your hand, I'll call on you. And I'm looking forward to talking to you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's kind of an off-the-wall question.
All right, let's go.
If he's seated, how will you work with President-elect Arevalo of Guatemala to stem the tide of immigration and stabilize that country so maybe we don't have that big a problem?
I think you have to work on both the positive and negative side, right?
You know.
Yep, the positive and negative side. On the positive side, what I think you need to continue to do is to try to develop relationships, both economic and supporting them governmentally down there. They're in our neighborhood.
Yes.
And we should be willing to help, because helping them helps us.
That's my point.
Right.
We broke them, we need to help them.
Right, helping them helps us. And it helps us because if we help them develop a thriving economy down there, there's fewer people who are going to want to leave there and come here. If we help to encourage them to enforce the rule of law, then there won't be people running away from there because they think they're going to be persecuted to try to come here. But on the other side of it, for that, he's got to do some things for us, okay? He's got to make sure that he sets the right tone and the right laws down there about people leaving to come here. He's got to work with us if we want to return people who have not passed the political asylum test.
Okay.
He's got to be willing to accept them back. Right now, they say, no backs, no returns, as kids used to say when I was younger, right? You got it, we're not taking it back. He's got to play an active role in it. But for us to do it, we got to spend time talking to these people. And I think sometimes what's happened in our own hemisphere is that we've ignored people, just assume they're going to be on our team. I never assume anybody's going to be on my team. I always assume the only way they're going to be on my team is if they see it's in their interest to be on my team. And if they respect me because I show them respect.
Yeah, and I ask that because we both know Arevalo is a socialist.
Yeah. But
but that's the way it's played.
But look, like, I can't pick the leader in every country in the world, nor do I care to, because I'm sure I mess it up somehow, right? We're gonna try to pick the folks here, as we saw in the House of Representatives 2 nights ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't be worried about picking everybody else. So sometimes I'm gonna be dealing with a socialist. Sometimes I'm gonna be dealing with an authoritarian dictator. Sometimes I'm gonna be dealing with someone who's democratically elected. Whatever it is, my job as president is to figure out, how do I develop a respectful relationship with them? Sometimes it's going to mean getting in there and giving them the business. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's going to mean extending our hand to say, I know you got some problems, we can help. We got to figure that out. And the only way to figure that out is to spend time on it. And it takes time. And you got to be willing to invest that time. And it's not just a phone call that you get when you're elected and say, okay, I look forward to working with you. And then you don't talk to them again until 4 years later when you say, I'm looking forward to working with you in my second term. You know, like, you've got to have that relationship. It takes time. And that's why it's the hardest job in the world. Because everybody wants to have a relationship with the President of the United States. We are still the most important country in the world. And as a result, everybody's at your doorstep. But that's okay. I'd rather be that than be a country that nobody cares about. They care about us, let's use it to our advantage. And it was like the way it worked for me in New Jersey. Mary Pat and I spent more time with folks that not only we didn't agree with, but some that we didn't even like. But they got elected too. And so for me to be successful as governor, I needed a relationship with all of them. And it's also big things and little things. Yeah. Like when you analogize it to the state legislature, I would call every member of the state legislature every year on their birthday. And after a while, when I was doing it for a few years, like if I didn't call, because usually I'd make the calls in the morning when I was in the car going to the State House. If for some reason I was busy, I was doing something else, and if it got past lunchtime and that person didn't get a call, there I'd call my chief of staff going, is the governor angry with me? It was my birthday today, I didn't get a phone call. Like, no. You're just at a meeting all morning. I'm sure he'll get to you later in the day. And it seems like a stupid little thing, but it mattered. Because there's only one of me. There's only one governor in a state. Same way there's only one president. It's about all the ways that you try to make a relationship work. This is still a business where we're dealing with other human beings. They may have different philosophies, they may speak different languages, but they are human. And humans want to be liked. They want to be paid attention to. And we need to have a president who understands that and is willing to spend the time to do it. And Guatemala is a great example of where there's lots of differences, but we got to figure out a way to make that work because the dysfunction down there is being deposited right at our border. Yes, ma'am.
My son Tom wanted me to say hi to you. So,
Thank you.
I feel very strongly that we should have term limits. Yeah. What happened the other day to McCarthy, which was a sad thing, because now, even when they get another speaker in, you might have 20, 15 days left to work on another government thing. And for them, a lot of them to say, let the government shut down.
Yeah.
They don't give a rat's, you know what? Because they get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a real crime.
It is.
And I know they're not gonna put the term limits in. They're not gonna do that themselves. How can we, as people,
It's really hard. First of all, let me say I completely agree with you. Having been subject to term limits as governor, I can only serve, now I know in New Hampshire you don't have term limits, but in New Jersey, the governor has term limits. I can do 2 consecutive terms, that's it. If it's good enough for the governor of the state, if it's good enough for the president of the United States, how are these people indispensable? Please. I had a guy in New Jersey who just announced his retirement. Thank God. He had been in the state legislature for 50 years. I used to say to him when I was there, if you haven't accomplished everything you need to accomplish in like the next 30 days, what the hell are you gonna do? I mean, come on. You seriously? So there should be term limits. Here's the truth about it though. They have to do it, right? And so, the only way that's gonna happen, I think realistically, is if we start imposing the term limits on them. Start saying, no matter how much you like your congressman, or for that matter, but if you really like your congressman, I think 12 years is plenty. That's 6 terms in the House or 2 terms in the Senate. If you can't accomplish something in 12 years, it means you're no good. Like, in 12 years, that's enough. And the fact is that's 4 more years than the president gets, and then most governors get. But I think we have to start imposing it ourselves and say, you know what? Just so you know, we just elected you, you're your first term, you might get 5 more, but you're not gonna get any more than 5 more. When we start to do that, then maybe they'll feel like they're not giving something up by giving term limits. But right now they feel like they're forgiveness stuff, but look at Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you know, she's an easy punching bag, but for God's sake, like she's been the speaker twice, right? First woman speaker in the history of the country. I couldn't believe when I saw she announced she was running for re-election. Go home, man. Maybe because San Francisco is so bad right now. She's like, I'd rather stay in Washington, thank you, I don't want to go home. But go home. She's 83, right? Like, I mean, look, she's obviously, I've met her, I've been with her numbers of times. And so I understand she's still got energy, she still wants to do things, but do something else. Give somebody else a chance. You've been there, she's been there for 40 years. Come on now, like enough. So I agree with you completely. And look, when I got to the end of my 8 years, I have to tell you the truth, I was ready to go. I really was. Like 8 years of every day being the governor, like it was a lot. And plus, people get tired of listening to you. They really do. I mean, and certainly people in my state got tired of listening to me. Like, good, you know, we had 8 years of you, enough. We want something else. And that's natural and it's good. And I don't agree with the guy who replaced me. But they got to pick him. That's it. And he reverses a lot of stuff that I did. But you know what I did to solve my aggravation about that problem? I canceled the subscription to the New Jersey newspaper. I don't look. Because when he does stuff like that and says all this bad stuff about me and everything, I don't need that. Like, you know, you had your chance. I remember President Bush 43 saying to me, when I asked him what it was like to be an ex-president, he said to me, you know what, Chris, he said, I had 8 years in the most important job in the world. And I did the best I could every day. And he said, I put my head on the pillow every night, grateful that I had the chance and relieved that it's done.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's someone who's being honest about it. Right? He said this to me in America. He goes, I know I didn't do everything right. He said, but I did the best I could. And I was honest and direct. And now it's over. And you see President Bush, you don't see anything. You never hear about from him publicly, unless it's for something charitable or whatever. He doesn't get involved. And I think that's the way we should be. And it's been the rare exception since I've left Austin, New Jersey, where I've spoken about things that my successor is doing. If he says something that's like directly lying about me, which he's done a number of times, there are times when I can't even control myself and I figure I have to answer. But for the most part, he gets to make the decisions he makes. He won, and I think the same way. And I think if we set a pattern of that, then people would start to get used to it, rather than getting used to what they are now, which is you can stay there forever. And then you also lose touch with home. Because lots of those people don't even live here anymore, wherever here is. They live in Washington. And the further away you get from Washington, the less likely it is you're going home all that often. And then that's not good either, because then they become representatives of Washington and not representatives of us. So I think term limits are great. I lived by it. I was subjected to it. I wasn't going to try to run for a third term, even if I was allowed to. And the woman sitting behind me. I had somebody the other day say to me, hey, you know, we'd love for you to run for governor again, because the way our term limits work is it's 8 consecutive years. But if you take 4 years off, you can come back. And some guy came up to me in the airport and said, you know, if the presidency doesn't work out, you should run for governor again. I said, yeah, call Mary Pat. See what she would think about that. She said to me one time, you can run for governor again, but the new Mrs. Christie, I'm sure, will enjoy being first lady just as much as I did. So you got to know your limits in a bunch of ways. Yes, sir.
Talk to us about mass shootings. I work with people all over the world. They don't want to come here because they say it's the most dangerous place to come right now. There's more mass shootings in this country than any other place. It was never like that when I was growing up.
No.
Something has to be done, and nothing's going to be done.
Look, I think that the most important thing to remember about these mass shootings is that just about everyone I can think of involves someone who had some really serious mental health problems that weren't treated or recognized and taken care of. And then it manifests itself in acting out violently. And I think there's two reasons for that. One, we don't offer enough mental health treatment to people in this country. It's not available enough. Everything from our veterans who come home with PTSD from war scenes and can't get mental health treatment at the VA or anyplace else, to young people who either in school or once they're out of school can't get the treatment that they need. We need to make mental health treatment more available. And the only way to do that is to incentivize more people to get into the business, help to pay their tuitions, do other things that get them into that business. Second, we have to stop stigmatizing it. You know, it's a disease, like cancer, like diabetes, like heart disease, it's a disease. Most people who have those diseases, they and their families are willing to talk about it. You know, someone has a heart attack, you tell a neighbor or a friend, yeah, no, my dad, my uncle had a heart attack. You know, he's trying to get better, right? When people have mental health problems, we don't talk about it. Because we think it reflects on us. We use words like crazy, nuts, those kind of things. And what that does is it makes people hide. It makes them reluctant to be willing to ask for help. And then what happens is that anger builds. And that is a dangerous cocktail of anger and mental health problems. Now, you're going to have some people who will tell you that banning certain guns or whatever would help the problem. I would tell you that the statistics I've looked at, that of gun deaths in this country, 3% of them are from semi-automatic weapons. 97% of them are from handguns or shotguns. I've never heard anybody say they want to ban handguns or shotguns in this country, but I hear a lot of people say they want to ban automatic weapons. Here's my concern about it. It's kind of like saying, you know, we're going to shoot them stone cold dead at the border, or, you know, I'm going to detain everybody even though I have no place to put them. It sounds like a good solution. You sound like you're doing something. But in the end, you're not. You're not fixing the problem. And it's not to say that those 3% are not meaningful lives. Every life is a meaningful life. But we also have a Second Amendment. And I always get concerned about infringing on our Bill of Rights because it starts a little bit and then you have a slippery slope to it. And so I think that we have to work on the other side of it more. I'm for background checks and common sense things that keep the guns out of the hands of people who have mental health issues or have criminal backgrounds or had domestic violence. I think that makes sense. But I'm not for kind of saying, okay, I'm going to take this class of weapons and ban them. Because, by the way, the people who write those bans are lawyers, and I'm a recovering lawyer. Lawyers will write them in a way that, you know, the lobbyists that pay for them will want them written. And you may know exactly what kind of guns you want to ban if you want to ban any. But maybe the law isn't written exactly that way because other people get to it. I'm very nervous about doing that stuff. So I really think the much larger problem, and I think this is a bigger problem for us with drug abuse also, connected with mental health problems, we can treat people and help them save their lives if we stop acting like it is a personal failure to have this disease. It's the same way I feel about drug abuse. You know, people say, well, that's a personal decision. You decide to use drugs and now, well, let me tell you, my mother was an addict, but she was addicted to nicotine. She started smoking when she was 16 years old in 1948, when not only did people tell you it was bad for you, they told you it was good for you. Gave you energy, did all this other stuff. And my mom thought it was cool too. She was 16, she started smoking. She couldn't stop. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my life. She tried everything, gum, patches, all the different stuff that people try. She couldn't stop. And at 71 years old, after 55 years of smoking, she got lung cancer. And she died within 4 months. But when she got sick, I wasn't ashamed to tell people, even though she smoked, I said, well, Mom's got lung cancer. People would suggest doctors to you. Did you see this doctor? Did you try this? They would come and console her, try to help her. If my mom was a heroin addict, do you think that's the way it would have worked? Think I would have told anybody? Well, you know, my mom said she's a heroin addict. She's going through withdrawals. Do you think she would ask for help if anybody would have offered it? Because somehow we think there's a value judgment there. All of us have made decisions, I suspect, and I asked it, so I should ask it instead of saying it. Raise your hand if anybody in this room has never made a decision they wish they could take back. I am undefeated on that question, which means I have a group of honest people in this room, right? We're just lucky that the best decision we made wasn't drugs. Because you don't know, right? I remember when I was in college, and Len Bias is this great college basketball player. He took cocaine one time. He didn't know how it was going to affect him, but he saw his friends doing it. And he had just signed a big contract to go to the NBA, and he was going to celebrate. He tried cocaine, and it gave him a heart attack and killed him then. When you take it the first time, you don't know how it's going to affect you. You don't know whether genetically maybe you're predisposed to being addicted. You don't know whether it's going to kill you the first time you take it. People make bad judgments. But if we're the pro-life party, we got to be pro-life for the whole life, not just for the 9 months of the womb. And I've never been pregnant. But you know, it gets a lot more complicated, at least in my experience as a father, once they come out. That's when they make bad decisions. That's when they make questionable judgments. And that's when they need us the most. So I think all these things are connected. And what we need is a president now will say, it's okay to ask for help. We want you to ask for help if you have mental health issues, if you have drug abuse issues. And we're going to find ways to help you. I'll give Joe Biden credit for one thing he's done recently. And I suggested this when I was the chairman of President Trump's Drug Abuse and Opioid Commission. Do you know that, like, if you're a doctor in this country, you get a DEA license when you become a doctor, and you can write prescriptions for anything. And opioids. You can write prescriptions for opioids as much as you want. But up until about 6 months ago, you couldn't write a prescription for the medication-assisted treatment to get you off opioids unless you got specially trained. And there were a cap on the number of those licenses you could have. So in this country, we have people who could write unlimited for the addicting drug, but we're limited on what they could do for the drug that could treat people to make them feel better. You gotta give President Biden credit. He signed a law about 6 months ago that takes the cap off that and takes away the special training you need for that. That's a good thing. We suggested that in the President Trump's commission report back in 2018, and they didn't get it done. I'm glad he got it done now, because now treatment, there's a chance for treatment to be more available for those folks. So deal with the mental health issues, talk about it, let people understand that if you're having those problems, if you're depressed, if you feel isolated, ask for help, and we'll give it to you. And maybe the first time we won't hear, then maybe the first time we hear about it will not be when, you know, the police are at somebody's house and the neighbors are out front talking to the media saying, he seemed like he was kind of disturbed, but we didn't say anything. Or the parents are saying he looked depressed, but we didn't know what to do. We need to do that. I think that's the best way to go about it. And I'll grant you that it's an imperfect answer. I wish I had a better one. I really do. But I think it's an honest one, and I think it's the best way to go about it. But, you know, in this country, we're constantly balancing our rights versus our restrictions, and I think we have to be careful about how we do it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so first of all, I'm a registered independent. I voted Democratic my entire life, but I believe in you. I'm really excited for you. But I have an 18-year-old who just registered to vote for the first time, and she has always kind of followed my Democratic lead.
Good. What's the use of having children if you can't brainwash them?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, no apologies necessary.
I don't apologize.
Good.
So my question to you is, as a new registered voter, an 18-year-old woman who just moved to Boston, she's going to college, you know, she's very, you know, the abortion thing is very big for her. I don't want to call her a bleeding heart because she's not. She's got a really great head on her shoulders. But how can you, what would you say to an 18-year-old girl who is just registering to vote, and how would you get her to believe in some of the values that you're believing in, and coming from a mother who has always voted democratically? What are some of the things that you would say to her to try to get her to, see what you're saying, not brainwash. I just, like I said,
That's your job, I can't break it.
no, I'm doing my best to brainwash, but seriously, what are some of the things that you would say to a new voter to try to get them to see some of your views politically?
First thing I would say to her is, I was in the same position you were in. I was.
Yeah.
44 years ago.
Yep.
Okay? I was just turned 18 in September of 1980. And if you remember, those who are old enough to remember, I'm sure you're not. But
I was 4.
Yeah. So you don't remember. Yeah, I guess not. Good night, everybody.
Stop where you're at.
Yeah, quit while I'm ahead. And it was a really awful time back then. We had double-digit interest rates, double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment. We had hostages in Iran, and we had the Soviet army in Afghanistan. And Jimmy Carter was the president. And he was basically saying, it's your fault, not mine. You guys have a malaise, there's a malaise in the country, and we have to work through it, but it's, like, we're a big part of the problem is him. And here I am starting college, and you want your life, you want to have hopes and dreams, and it's an exciting time in your life. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I decided, okay, well, I get a chance to vote for the first time. I better sit and really listen to these guys and figure out what I'll vote for. And I voted for the person who gave me hope. And that was Reagan. He gave me hope. Carter was telling me these problems can't be solved, they're too hard. Reagan was saying, you can fix this. And I have a plan to fix it. I'm going to tell you how. Because I trust you. I want you to be empowered. I think the first thing I say to her is, vote for the person who believes in you and your ability to lift yourself up because of your talents, your abilities, your hard work. Second, I'd say, I know you're concerned about the abortion issue, you're an 18-year-old young woman. So let me tell you what my position is, personally and then governmentally. Personally, I'm pro-life. I'm raised Catholic. I always believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother, because I don't think anybody under those circumstances should have to give their own life, give birth to another life, nor should they have to give birth to a child that was created through a violent act. I think that's wrong. Now, as president, given where we are right now, I would say the federal government should not play any role in this. Right? Every state should make their own decision. We've been fighting as conservatives for 50 years, saying Roe versus Wade was wrong because it's not in the Constitution, and the federal government should have anything to do with it. Now that the court agrees with us, you got a bunch of Republicans saying, now that we can do it, let's do it our way. No. That's intellectually dishonest. I've said all along that I think states are the best people to make these decisions because they're the closest to the people and people that have the most effect on what happens in their own state rather than what happens in Washington, D.C. So what I would say to your daughter is, whatever the laws are in New Hampshire, if you like them, make sure you support people who will support them. And if you don't like them, go to the state capitol and fight against them and organize with other people who do. Now look, I live in New Jersey. Let's compare 2 states. Oklahoma, right now it said no abortion unless the life of the mother is threatened. That's it. I don't agree with that. My state, New Jersey, says abortion up to the 9th month. I don't agree with that either. Okay? So we're going to have some big differences in the country. But that's what we have to deal with, because otherwise someone's going to impose something on us. And the only way I would let the federal government ever be involved is if, after all 50 states weigh in, there was an obvious consensus. And if there was, then you could get 60 votes for it in the Senate, which couldn't get 60 votes for anything right now in the Senate having to do with abortion. And you get the House to agree too. So on abortion, I'd say to your daughter, you have the chance now to live in a place that's very important to you, supports with what you believe, and to try to change the laws in places where you don't like, which when the Supreme Court was doing it, you couldn't change the law. It was the law, that was it. The third thing I'd say to her is that vote for someone who shares your values. It doesn't mean you agree on every issue, but vote for someone who you believe shares your values. Meaning, vote for someone who, when you look at them,
you say, okay, they value life. They value freedom. They value hard work. They value family. They value allowing you to have the friends I want to have and conduct my life the way I want to conduct it. They believe that freedom means freedom. You get to decide. Got to act within the law. But absent that, I'm not here to tell anybody how to live their lives. I don't think government should. And we got a bunch of big government Republicans now too, by the way. Used to just be Democrats. A bunch of big government Republicans. You got Governor DeSantis in Florida, who wants to tell everybody what to do. He wants to tell Disney what things they can object to and not object to.
Boo.
Right? He was like, I don't agree with Disney's position on the bill that they opposed in Florida, but I absolutely will fight for the right to oppose it. Like anybody who supports it has a right to support it. So my third point to your daughter is, vote for someone who in the end you believe their values match yours. Not every position, but their values. Are they the kind of person you'd be willing to sit down and have dinner with? Are they the kind of person who you think you could have a beer with at a bar or some kind of other drink, and that they wouldn't offend you? They would, in fact, listen to you. And that's all you can ask, because in the end, look, the only person I agree with 100% of the time is me. I'm always right to me. Very happy to tell you that, all right? But we've been married for 37 years. There are a number of things we don't agree on, but let me tell you what we do agree on. We agree on our values, about the way our children should be raised, what kind of people we want them to be, what kind of house we want them to grow up in. And all the other things that we agree or disagree on, we'll have good fights about it. But in the end, the core things are those values that we believe in. And if she can find someone politically whose values match hers, she should vote for them too. That's the three things. And like in the end, any politician who agrees with you 100% of the time is lying to you. And we get pretty good at it. You know, we kind of look at someone, and if we're really good, you can figure out, let's see, what they want for this question. And I'll give them that, and I hope they don't remember, and do something different. Except today, everybody's filming you with cameras. So it's very tough to get out of that. But in the end of those three things, the biggest thing I say to her is vote for the person who gives you hope. Who doesn't play to your fears, but plays to your dreams. Who doesn't play to your anger, but plays to your aspirations. At 18, man, life is nothing but tomorrows. Nothing but tomorrows. It's great. I wish that I knew at 18 what I know now. Man, I wouldn't have worried about half the stuff I worried about, right? It's all about tomorrows. Ronald Reagan was the guy I voted for because he made me feel good about what my tomorrow could be. That's what I'd say to her. And you know, if she winds up voting for the other guy, she'll be wrong. but at least she'll be happy, you know? And that's what matters the most.
Thank you.
Do you have any, could you talk a little bit about what you might be able to do to get us to start talking to each other again?
First of all, the president has the greatest megaphone in the world. And I remember I was saying this before, words matter. And words from the president matter. And so the first thing is, if not only through my words, but through my actions, I start setting the example to people that I'm willing to work with the other side. Not just by this, but by actually doing things with them. And that's the biggest tragedy I think about what happened with Kevin McCarthy this week. Those 8 people voted him out because he made a compromise with the Democrats. Of course, the irony is that the only way they got him out was they all voted with the Democrats. That seems hypocritical to me, but we'll leave that for another day. So the first thing is you gotta show it with your actions. And I'll give you an example from when I was governor. When I was running in 2009, I was running against the incumbent Democrat, John Corzine. And the building trades unions, the carpenters, the pipers, the plumbers, all those guys and women, they endorsed Corzine. And at the speech they gave endorsing him, the guy who's in charge of all the building trades said to the governor, of course, like, Governor, don't worry, we're gonna make sure you win. And not only gonna win, but we are gonna kick Chris Christie's ass up one end of the New Jersey Turnpike and down the other. I won. So now, these guys and women are petrified. Because they remember what they said about me, and I think they know I remember too. So my second week in office, I said to my deputy chief of staff, invite all the heads of the building trades to the governor's mansion for breakfast. She said, really? I said, yes, all of them. So I came downstairs that morning, they were all sitting around that big dining room table, and I'm sitting right across from the guy who said, he's gonna kick my ass from one end of the New Jersey Turnpike to the other. Billy Mullins is his name. And Billy stood up, he said, Governor, thanks so much for having us. And we shook hands, and he said to me, you know, when I came to the gate this morning and gave my name, I thought it wouldn't open. And I said, it did though, didn't it, Billy? He said, yeah, so I want to make one thing clear to all you guys. We can fight for the next 8 years. I said, or we can work together and we can create jobs for your members and make their lives better. I'm willing to do either, but I prefer to work with you, and that's why I have you. 4 years later, they all endorsed me. A Republican, the union, endorsed the Republican because I gave them my word and I kept it. When we had issues that they were concerned about, I gave them a hearing. I didn't always agree with them, but they always had an ability to make their voice heard, and if I thought I could help them, I did. And we worked on a lot of stuff together, and we did a lot of good things together. And I think if you went back and talked to any of them, they would tell you that we had and have a great relationship. That's the second thing we need to do. You need to reach out to the people who have worked against you and let them know now, when the election is over, it's all of us. And when all of us do well, that's a good thing for the country. The third thing the president needs to do is, as I mentioned before, is spend the time around the country talking to people and listening. I did over 200 town halls when I was governor of New Jersey, and some of them were pretty raucous and some of them were relatively calm, but I did them because I said to my staff, I can stay in touch with people that way. I don't only hear what I hear in the media, but I hear directly from people. You're a little intimidated because you're the governor sometimes you're not intimidated at all. But I would hear what was on their mind, because I would do it just like I'm doing it here. No prearranged questions or anything else, we just raise their hand and call them. I think as president, you have to do the same thing, or else you remain out of touch. And when you do that, the country believes they have a president who cares about what they think. That helps to bring us together. The last thing is, we've got to get rid of some of the really horribly inflammatory language we've been using. Look, I'm from New Jersey. So we get an A in inflammatory language. And we're edgy, we're tough, we get a chip on our shoulder.
I was born
Where were you born?
there. Newark.
Newark, me too. Right, so, Benjamin Franklin used to say about New Jersey, we're a keg tapped at two ends. New York and Philadelphia, right? And so we're stuck in the middle. We don't have our own TV network. We have New York and Philadelphia. So we have an edge. But there's a time to use tougher language. There's a time not to. And my tougher language, almost always, I make some mistakes every once in a while. We all do. But they're the exception. My tougher language is geared towards trying to get something done. Try to push people to get something done. Not to just make fun of somebody. Not to pick on their weaknesses. Not to belittle them and make them feel like they were nothing. I can criticize their positions, but not who they were. And what we've gotten from Donald Trump is awful, awful stuff. Did you see what he said about John Kelly, who was his longest serving chief of staff yesterday? Small brain. Awful job. He picked this guy to be Secretary of Homeland Security and to be his chief of staff. He's his longest serving chief of staff. Now, because Kelly disagrees with him, all of a sudden Kelly's an idiot and a bad person. We have set up a circumstance in this country with him as our leader, where that stuff has become acceptable and in some cases required. And guess what? It split up families and friends. There are people now who, you can't go to a Thanksgiving dinner or to a cocktail party, and people start talking about politics, and they can't even speak to each other. It didn't used to be that way. We disagree, but it wouldn't cause people to storm out or yell and scream at each other, or say you're no good because you believe this or that, or she's voted for Democrat, so I can't talk to her anymore, right? I mean, it's just not the way it is, but it's way to come.
So this 24-hour news cycle also feeds it because it's important to be first, and then you can contradict yourself and amend it. That-
Well, some people are willing to do that. He's willing to do it within the 24-hour news cycle, right? Say one thing or another. But here's the thing, the 24-hour news cycle, I blame a little bit on that, but it's what you say in the 24-hour news cycle. If you act like an abusive bully, that's gonna get reported. If you don't, look, the other good thing about the 24-hour news cycle is they need to report something, right? They always need something more, and it depends on what you give them. And so, I think in all those ways, you can help change it. And the last way is this. The way you conduct yourself in your life, your example, can help to bring the country back together. Who do you meet with? Who do you have to the White House? Who do you go and visit? Look, I'm telling you right now, you elect me president, I'm gonna be friends with Democrats. I just am, because they got elected too. And so, it doesn't mean I always agree with them, and I'll have good fights with them. The guy Steve Sweeney I talked about before, we had a great relationship for 8 years. It wasn't perfect. I remember one morning going down on a Sunday morning to the end of the driveway, and I picked up the biggest newspaper in the state, and it said, Sweeney, I want to punch Christie in the head. It wasn't always nice. But 4 days later, I got sick. And they had to take me to the hospital, an asthma attack. And I'm laying in the hospital. I was fine. But my phone rang. It had no caller ID on it, and I was bored, sitting in this gurney, right? So I answered it. And I heard his voice go, Governor? And I said, yeah, hey, Steve. And he goes, you're gonna die, are you? And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, good. Because that's what really matters. He goes, how about we get together tomorrow or the next day and just hash all this stuff out? I said, sounds good. Those are the kind of relationships I want to build. And if you show the country you're willing to do that here, then everybody else across the country will feel more empowered to be that way too. The president is such a unique job in the world. You set examples with everything you do. And one of my biggest problems with Donald Trump is he doesn't care. He doesn't care that he's setting an awful example for our children and our grandchildren. He doesn't care that he's making us look like roads around the world. He doesn't care. He only cares about the person he sees in the mirror. And if that's the kind of president we have, then this is the kind of country we're going to have. Divided, angry, ugly, self-consumed. I think the president can change that, and that's exactly what I would intend to do. Yes, sir.
Welcome to me.
Happy to be back.
I,
My second home, for God's sake.
me too, kind of. I was, during Hurricane Sandy, I lived in a little town on the beach called Manuel. You may remember what happened.
Oh, man, it was the second place I went to after Sandy was over.
It looked like a war zone.
Yeah, it looked like the set of a horror movie, right?
That's right.
You couldn't believe it.
But you did something as governor, which, is becoming more and more unusual, and that is that you govern. I sort of feel like, I thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And, but I shouldn't actually have to, because that was your
That
job.
was my job.
But nonetheless.
Governor, supposed to govern.
Well, you kind of figure that, Latin root and all that.
Yep.
But in any event, as a resident of New Jersey at the time, seeing you today and visiting with you, I'm reminded, how much, I like and respect you. I don't necessarily agree with all of the conclusions you've come to, but, that point of liking and respecting people is how things can get done. We've gotten a lot away from that. That having been said, my question is, you know, up until about a year ago, I was dividing my time between living in New York City, in Manhattan, and up here, and then ultimately I moved up here full time. But I've been watching some of the things that have been going on in New York City, especially in my old neighborhood, the Upper West Side. And you've got guys going into like CVS's and Target stores, and I mean, they're going in with backpacks, and they're loading them up, and nobody's doing anything, and they're walking out. And you've got people, you know, on the streets, you know, basically living there, throwing garbage over. I mean, it's really getting to a point. And I just don't, it's eluding me as to what could really be done about that. Because there's a lot of laws in New York City and New York State that make it very difficult. I mean, guys are allowed to live on the sidewalk kind of like. But the quality of life is really getting, you know, really trashy. It's, you know, with the way the laws seem to work there, and I mean, to significant, I mean, I don't know whether it's political will or law enforcement's, you know, kind of feeling like they're handcuffed or whatever, but it's a, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on what could be done about something like that?
Yeah, I think the answer, by the way, to your either or is yes, to both. It's both that some of the laws are difficult, and it's also that law enforcement feels handcuffed. They do. And it's because they're not getting supported by the prosecutors, because they arrest people and then they send them right back out on the street.
Right.
And
criminals know that.
Of course, they're not stupid. You know, they go where they have the least chance of being caught and the least chance of being punished. And that's why you're seeing it in Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and Chicago, and New York.
Well, I mean, I heard Target
Philadelphia.
closing stores and stuff.
Target's closing their stores in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and New York. So, look, I think the only way a president can have, first of all, let me start with this. It can be solved. And the proof that it can be solved was the New York City that I grew up in, or right near, in the 1970s and the 80s. Before Rudy Giuliani became mayor, there were 2,300 murders a year in New York City. Now, even now, where things are really bad, you know how many murders last year? 700.
It's not as bad as it was.
No,
It's just.
but it feels bad, doesn't it? And you got to the point on it, it's quality of life. It's not so much that you feel in danger all the time like you did back in the late 70s and into the 80s. It is that it's not enjoyable anymore. New York City is a great, fun city with amazing things to do and see, but not if you're walking over people on the streets who have needles in their arms. I walked to Madison Square Garden this past spring for a hockey game. And I saw a guy sitting up against the wall, his head back, his legs out, and he had a hypodermic needle in his foot. And obviously was stoned and just was laying there. And like, everybody just walked by and put up with it. What the federal government can do is what I talked about earlier, which is take the federal prosecutors in cities like New York and these other cities and say, look, job number one for you is to get this violent crime under control. If the local people won't do it, we're going to do it. And we have all the laws we need to be able to do that and to take jurisdiction over it. It wouldn't be my first choice, but given how bad things have gotten, we have no other choice. Because America can't be a great country without great cities. And you heard the list of all those cities that we all know we're watching: New York, Philly, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland. These are some of the great cities in this country that are being destroyed from a rot from within. And so what the federal government can do is go in there and enforce the law. And I think when people start to see it improving, they're going to demand it from the local officials. Right now they feel helpless because they think maybe it can't get solved. They just throw their hands up. Some of them move. Some of them hide. Once we show them it can be done, I think they will insist that the other people do it too. And once the other people start to do it, we can pull back out and let them do the job that they're supposed to do. But it absolutely can be fixed. And on the comments you made about me governing, look, I appreciate that. And it's great to have somebody from New Jersey who will recognize that and tell people up here about that. Because look, in the end, that's what the job is. And someone asked, you were talking to me about Democrats and working with people. And Look, I still take an enormous amount of crap for having shaken President Obama's hand 6 days before the election when he came to New Jersey to see the damage in Sandy.
But it was the right thing to do.
Of course it was, and I would not do it differently. Now, all those years later, nearly 11 years later, I wouldn't do it differently. Because you have one president at a time, you have one governor at a time. It wasn't like I wasn't aware of the fact that the election was in 6 days. I knew. I was the keynote speaker for Mitt Romney at the Republican convention. I was his #1 surrogate campaigning around the country. I raised more money for Mitt Romney than anybody else in the country except for his own sons. And so I was totally invested in Mitt Romney. I'll tell you a funny story about that day. So we have this press conference where they talk about the hug, right? Well, we never hugged, but I got asked a question. This was, say it happened on a Monday, this was on a Wednesday. They said to me, how has the president been in helping you deal with these problems? We had 365,000 homes destroyed in 24 hours. We had no operating water treatment or wastewater treatment plants in the entire state. 2/3 of the state's residents were without power. We had most of the major highways were blocked, and at the Jersey Shore, they were cut in half by water. It was, every school was closed. It was an impossible situation, right? And they said, how's the president been? I said, the president has done everything I've asked him to do. And on behalf of the people of New Jersey, I thank him for his attention and for wanting to do the very best for us, and that's what he's trying to do. That was essentially what I said. I don't remember every word I said, but that was basically it. And of course, that caused all kinds of uproar or whatever, because I said something nice about a Democrat. So we got in the helicopter, in his helicopter then, to take a tour up the coast for him to see the coastline. And we got in, and on Marine One, when you sit with the president, you're right across from him, and you're like this close to each other. Your knees are practically touching. It's just the way the helicopter's built, right? So we sit down and look at each other, and he looks at me and he says, Gov, look, he goes, I realize that couldn't have been easy for you out there, and I really appreciate you telling the truth and saying those nice things about me. I said, well, Mr. President, look, it's the truth. You earned them, you deserve them. I got asked a question, I gave an answer. So I appreciate the thank you, but you don't need to thank me for telling the truth. Then there was that like awkward silence. Because now, what do you say, right? And I looked at him and I felt like I needed to say something. So I said, you know I'm not voting for you, right? And he started laughing. He goes, I got no worries about that. I'm like, good. I just didn't want us to think this was going too far. I'm definitely not voting for you. But it doesn't matter. That was my job. And every person, the ones who voted for me and the ones who didn't, were entitled to that from me. I got the honor of being governor of that state, the state where I was born and raised. And if I ever put politics ahead of that situation, then I would have been violating my oath, and I would have never done that. And I wouldn't do it today, despite all the garbage it took. In fact, I saw President Obama 2 weeks ago. We were at a conference, and he surprised the group and showed up at this conference. And so he gave a little talk, whatever, and then afterwards he saw me in very PAC. And he pointed to me and went like this. So I walked over and I said, Mr. President, good to see you. He goes, they're still giving us crap about that day, aren't they? And I said, yeah, except I'm the one taking it, sir, not you. And he goes, good, well, I won't say anything nice about you. I said, good, please, do me a favor. Don't say anything nice about me. It's a shame that that's where our politics is, but it didn't affect us that day. And I would never let it. And if I was president, I would act exactly the same way. The job comes first. When you put your hand on that Bible and you take an oath, the job comes first. And everything else comes second. And if you don't believe that, then in my view, you don't belong in the job. So thanks for bringing it up. Yes, ma'am.
I got involved in politics as a domestic terrorist, going to school board meetings.
Oh, there you go. The most dangerous place in America, man.
Screaming, pointing,
Yeah.
all those kinds of things. In Hoboken, New Jersey,
Mm.
or another New Jersey prison.
Yeah.
I'm here on vacation. And that was in '09, I was elected. And I'm the only Republican in Hudson County
Yeah.
elected. And there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do. And then Chris Christie became governor, and all of a sudden, we could do, we had some superintendent's pays, and I'm going into all the details, but it was like, wow, finally, we had some support from Trenton to help us, the little guys who are actually doing the work on the school board. And one thing I learned is it's being on the school board. I think it's worse than being governor.
Oh, it is.
President.
Let me tell you something. I've always said this. The school board is the most thankless elected position in America.
And pay zero.
Pay zero,
Yeah.
everybody knows you, everybody's got an opinion. Look, politics, schools, and baseball are all the same. Because everybody votes, so they think they know what to do in politics. Everybody went to school, so they think they know what to do in education. And everybody played baseball, so they think they can manage the Red Sox, right? So like, it's just the way it is, so everybody's got an opinion on everything you do.
So what, at the federal government, there's not a lot you can do to come all the way down to the granular level of, you know, all the issues, we all know that go on in schools. So what do you say about schools and school
You-
choice and?
You will not be surprised to hear, given that you were serving on a school board in Hoboken when I was governor, that I think that the fact that we spend $400 billion a year on K-12 education in this country, and that 39% of our eighth graders don't read at grade level, and 25% of our eighth graders don't do math at grade level, in this country today is a disgrace. And it is the product of a public school system, which not universally, but in enough instances has failed. And families have no choice but to take what they get. And so what I would say to you is that, like, yeah, it's hard at the federal level, but what I would do is you have more than half the states now who have some type of school choice program. We need to take all the money we spend federally at the Department of Education, which is about $80 billion, and use that to incentivize all the states to say, if you put school choice in place, we'll give you your share of the money. And you can use it on school choice. Because what we're doing in Washington, D.C. is a Band-Aid, it's nothing. It's $80 billion, it's 20% of the overall spend for K-12 education in the country. You're not going to change the whole country that way, but what you can do is incentivize people to change. And you know, having run a school board, every dollar counts. And the money that comes from the feds matters. It's not determinative. Property taxes are, state aid are the two that are mostly determinative. But if we can incentivize people to do that and make them understand why, because competition in our system is good. And look, I went to public school, K-12. I grew up in Livingston. We had a great public school system. I got a great education. I'm running for president of the United States. I can't really complain about what it did for me. But if you go to one of your neighboring towns in Jersey City, and you think about some of the schools there, you realize that a lot of those kids, despite how much we spend, are consigned to failure. Newark, Camden, Trenton, Patterson, worse than all. Those families deserve a choice, and they should not be required to sit in that public school that's failing because they don't have the money to pay for something else. Now, let me tell you how it works in my house. I went to public school, kindergarten to 12th grade. Mary Pat went to parochial school, kindergarten to 12th grade. We have 4 children. They all went to parochial school. So she sits there quietly smiling. You'll know why she's smiling. But like, look, in the end, we had the money to make that choice. We pay all these property taxes to fund the schools. 75% of our property taxes go to the schools. And it's a lot. In New Jersey, the most in property taxes anywhere in the country. I didn't complain about it. I think it's my obligation to help fund the public schools, whether my kids use them or not. But we made enough money to be able to pay for the parochial school too. But what if you don't? It's not right. Talk about 2 tiers of justice. That's 2 tiers of justice at its most basic level, because you don't get a good education. There's nowhere to go in this country. Nowhere to go. So what I would do is to use that to try to encourage a radical change in this and say, let's have everybody have choice and go where they want to go. A lot of people pick public schools. I would bet you in my old hometown of Livingston, or in the current town of Livingston, Mendon, the overall majority of people would pick the public school. Because they're already paying for it, and they think it's good education, and it is, and they'd be fine. But if there are people who want to get out of a failed situation, why should we be spending all this money for failure? I'll give you an example. The best example I have from when I was governor was Camden. Camden had 6 of the 10 worst schools in our state. And the city of Camden is 1 square mile. 6 of the 10 worst schools in the state. So we went in there, we took over the school board, and we said, you are going to build charter schools and Renaissance schools. We're going to help you pay for it. We brought in private vendors as well. And what you've seen in the last 10 years since we did that is that the reading scores for 8th graders in Camden have gone up over 70%. The math scores for kids in Camden, even more, nearly 80%. And it's because it's not that the kids are not the problem. You have to craft the education to the circumstance you find the child in. For most of these kids, they had very difficult home lives. They didn't have parents. Parents, when they had parents at home, those parents were often working 2, 3, 4 jobs collectively to live. You're not home. Are you doing your homework? So we made longer school day, longer school year in Camden. And kids thrived. They got better. This should not be a one-size-fits-all. And the last thing I'll say about just the schools, since I got on the school calendar, like seriously, we need the whole summer off? I mean, you know that's all like the agrarian calendar, right? That's when it started, was that people farmed in the summer. Nobody in Hoboken is farming. No one's farming. No one's farming in my town either. They're not farming. This has become a perk of the job for the teachers union. That they get also, I remember when teachers, you'll remember, when the teachers union hates me. And I don't hate anyone, but I don't like them much. They used to complain about, I was trying to cap salaries, I was trying to do other things, make them pay for a small portion of their health benefits, put more into their pension, all this stuff. And they'd say to me, this is horrible, it's terrible, like we don't get paid enough. I'm like, wait a second. I saw one teacher one day and I said, you get paid, this particular teacher, got paid $95,000. She's like, well, $95,000 a year in New Jersey. I said, hold on a second. You work half a year?
Yeah.
Half a year. You do something else during the summer? Well, yes, I did something. Well, I get credit for that too. Because if you didn't have this job, you wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, we need to get real about what's going on here. I don't hate teachers, I love teachers. But they deserve a union as good as they are. And they don't have one. They have a union that, as you know, who protects the worst of them. Protects the worst of them. In the city of Newark, when I came in, there were over 100 teachers who were in what they called the rubber room. They called it the rubber room. These teachers were so bad that they thought it would be injurious to the students to have them in the classroom. But the union wouldn't permit them to fire them. So they paid them. And every day they would come to the central office and go into this big room, read books, read a newspaper, watch TV. And we're getting paid full-time salary and benefits. It's crazy, right? But what the unions do is they protect the worst. Because you know why? If they get fired, they don't pay union dues anymore. Now, you know how much in New Jersey they collected in union dues? Get ready. Every mandatory. By state law mandatory. At that time when I was governor, they were paying $730 a year in dues. How many members of the teachers union are in New Jersey? 200,000. Now, do the math. They collected that $146 million every year. And they didn't pay a nickel towards teacher pay, teacher health care. Not a nickel. You paid all that. And what did they do with the $146 million? They started paying themselves. spread the money around to help their friends who supported them no matter what, and oppose the people like me who came after them and demanded accountability. And you'll remember the billboards and the TV commercials. I mean, we had this great story. One time we're driving down the New Jersey Turnpike and there's this huge billboard. There are kids in the car, and Patrick, who is our third, was like 11 years old. There's this big billboard, and it was a horrible picture of me on there. And it's not hard to get, but they got it. And it said, Chris Christie hates children. And we passed by, and I'm hoping that the kids didn't see it. If any of our 4 kids would say anything, it was Patrick. Our third of 4, the straw that stirs the drink, who is now 23 years old. And he said, hey, Dad. I said, yeah, Patrick, because your people should get better pictures of you if they're going to put on. And I said, those were not my people, Patrick. They did that on purpose. So I think those are the things that we need to do. And the president needs to talk about it and inspire people to do better. And we can do better. And we have done better in the past. That's why I know we can. And we're accepting mediocrity, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't, because we kill those kids. I see you, Carl. Carl's going, one more question. Because I have to go on Caitlin Collins at 9 o'clock. So I got to end on time tonight, which I normally, as the reporters back here know, I never do. Yes, sir, you're the last question.
I'll ask a quick China question. Foreign affairs.
Is there a quick China question?
Well, maybe it's up to you. What would you do to contain China if you feel it needs to be contained? I mean, what would you do to beef up Taiwan to discourage China from invading Taiwan?
First thing I do is support Ukraine. Why? The Chinese are funding the Russians. They're paying for this war. And they're paying for it as a test. A test of the Russians, what kind of friends they're going to be, a test of us and what kind of adversaries we're going to be along with our allies in Europe. We have people in our party, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, who say, no business in Ukraine, it's not in our interest. The last time we turned our back to a shooting war in Europe, we ignored it for about 5 years, and then we gave 500,000 American lives to stop Hitler. It will happen again. Putin is an awful communist KGB autocrat, and he needs to be stopped. And the Chinese need to have a message sent to them. The juice is not worth the squeeze, fellas. Don't try it. Because the free world will unite against you. But the free world will only unite against them if the leader of the free world leads. And the message on Taiwan needs to be, look at what happened in Ukraine. And we didn't get in directly. And they lost. The vaunted Russian army. You really want to, because if you go after Taiwan, we're getting in. We can't afford not to. If for no other reason, 2/3 of the world's semiconductors are made in Taiwan. Everything you do, from turning on these lights, to picking up your phone, to heating and cooling your home, to starting your car, has a semiconductor. It's the price we pay for being so technologically advanced. Well, guess what? Who do you want in charge of those semiconductors? Us or the Chinese?
So you would send troops there?
To Taiwan, if we had to, yes, I would. Because the cost to us economically would be incalculable. But I don't want to send troops. What I want to do is arm the Ukrainians. If we make the Chinese understand that their investment in Russia turned out to be a failed investment, they're not going to test us in Taiwan. If we let them do it. We know what that's like. They test you. We get tested all the time. We failed that test at the beginning of World War II. And then we met it. If I had told you after 9/11 that it would be 22 years and we would not have another foreign terrorist attack on American soil for 22 years, would you believe me?
Probably not.
Right. Why? because we hit back and we hit back hard. And we raised our own defenses and we spent the money we need to defend ourselves and to go after the people who perpetrated it. And we killed people all around the world who were involved with it, including bin Laden. And those folks now are degraded. They don't have the same capabilities anymore because of what we've done. And they're intimidated. We need to show strength to make sure that we have peace. Now, in terms of containing the Chinese, I don't have any interest in containing the Chinese economically. Let's compete with them. I'm happy to have America compete with them. Now, they got to stop stealing our intellectual property.
I mean more militarily, like the way they're, the Spratlys and all the little.
Well, no, and look, so the things we need to do militarily, we need to reconfigure our defense budget. It's not that we don't spend enough. It's that we spend it stupidly, in my view. Our threat now is not Russia, it's China. And how do we contain China? More ships and more submarines. Those who control the South China Sea, make sure it's free, will be the ones who control and prevent any conflict. And so militarily, they're building those artificial islands in the South China Seas, which they're not supposed to be doing because it's international waters, and Obama let them do it, and Trump let them do it. We need to send a clear message by having more ships and sending them there. Saying, we're here, keep screwing around, and things could get ugly. They're not prepared yet to have a war with us. They're still probably a decade away, and the capability to have a war with us. Let's use this decade to make ourselves even more prepared and to send a very clear message to them, which is, we don't mind having you as an adversary and a competitor. We don't want you as an enemy. But if you become one, we'll be prepared. And right now, I don't think we can say that we're prepared. Not completely. What we've done in the past has gotten us to the point where we are. But they're moving. In the last 10 years, the growth in their military is the greatest growth of any military in any 10-year period in world history. So they're using the money they've made and the technology that they've stolen to do that. And so we've got to get real about what the competition is. And if we don't, we're going to pay a much dearer price. I don't want to send troops to Taiwan. I will if I have to. But we need to arm the Taiwanese now. Part of the Ukrainian failure was Obama not arming Ukraine when he came in and he took Georgia and Crimea. He was signaling to us what he was going to do. If we had armed them then, Putin doesn't come in because it'll be a fair fight. He came in because he knew he didn't think it was going to be a fair fight. He didn't know how hard they would fight. And I've been there. I went to Ukraine, and I saw it personally. And those people have extraordinary resolve. And I asked one of the people in Bucha, one of the cities I went to visit, this woman said to me, we will never let Russia take our country. And I said, why are you so certain of that? And she looked at me, she goes, because they've done it before and we didn't like what it was like. Mm-hmm. These are people who have lived under the thumb of the Russians as the Soviet Union, and they know what it's like to be occupied by them, and they don't want that life back. And when how awful it is not speculation, but you lived it, it makes it more real to these folks. So I think what we do in Ukraine will dictate both the success of our military relationship with China, and will also dictate what level of sacrifice we'll need to make in the future. I don't want American men and women to have to go to war on my watch. Don't want it. So if you don't want that, you better modernize your military. And by the way, last year, our total aid in the last year to Ukraine was 5% of 1 year of our Pentagon budget. And they've degraded nearly 50% of Russian military hardware. I don't know, it seems like a pretty good investment to me. And when I met with Zelensky in Kyiv, we met one-on-one for an hour. And one of the first things he said to me was, we do not want American troops here ever, nor will we accept them. And I said, why not, Mr. President? And he said, because we've been occupied by the Russians. We don't want to be occupied by them again, but with all due respect, we don't want to be occupied by you either. We want our own country. We just need you to help us to keep it. And that help just means arms, not men and women. And I believe he means it. And I believe it's a point of both personal and political survival for him. And remember something, the second day of the Russian invasion, Joe Biden called Zelensky and said, "We will send a helicopter for you and your family." Remember his response? He said, "Mr. President, I don't need a helicopter, I need guns." I think that's, and they're not perfect, because no government is perfect, as we've talked about all night tonight. But they're sure as hell better than Vladimir Putin, and better than President Xi of China, and better than Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and better than the mullahs in Iran. And those four are now in league with each other, helping Russia. And we need to make sure that we send a clear message to those folks, because if we don't, we're gonna pay a bigger price later, and I don't want to pay that price. So thanks for the question. Thank you. Thank you for coming out on a difficult traffic night. I want to thank all of you for being here, right? I want to, yeah, it was one of those highways of people getting here. We have people calling saying we can't get here because there was an accident. I don't know. That's what they told me. We had to change our entire route here from where I was coming from Boston earlier. So, let me end with this. My wife's looking at me like, what are you doing? You should have ended that. I'm going to end with this. You all get to make this call. You are the political, presidential wine tastings of America. No one gets to decide before you. You get to see us like this. No one else in the country besides you and Iowa gets to see this. And with that, I believe comes an obligation. That obligation is try to get it right. Don't worry about the polls. Polls in October. In October, Jeb Bush was going to be president. Right? In October, Hillary Clinton was going to be president. I don't see any of those portraits hanging anywhere. You get to decide. Don't think you have to accept anything. That's what makes this country great. You don't have to. It makes New Hampshire even greater. Because before anybody else makes a decision, you get to. And that's why I'm here. I'm here because I want you to see me personally, directly. I want to answer your questions directly and not evade them. I want you to make a judgment about whether I'm the right person to be the president. And, people have it's the second time I've done this, so people have a vision of what it's like to run for president. And I think it's really glamorous. No thanks. And there are moments, I will tell you, there are moments that are really cool. When you stand here and you think to yourself, wow, I'm a kid from New Jersey. My dad worked in the Breyers ice cream plant. Served in the Army during the Korean War. And came home, was the first person in his family to ever go to college on the GI Bill at night for 6 years at Rutgers. My mom grew up in a single mother household and never went to college, worked as a receptionist. And I can guarantee you, my mom we lost a long time ago, 19 years ago, but my dad, you will see him soon. He is threatening to come here. He is 90 years old, and he is still peppy. And he's threatening to come here, and he's going to be here soon. He went door to door 8 years ago at 82, and he is threatening to go door to door at 90, and I think he's just mad. They never in a million years, I'm sure, thought that their oldest son would get to run for president of the United States. It's not lost upon me what a privilege this is. And I want you to know how seriously I take it. And that if I become president, that I guarantee you, then I'll make you feel proud again of the person who's in the White House. You won't love me every day. There'll be some days you won't like me. But I will never make you feel ashamed of your vote. And you'll never have to make an excuse to somebody else to try to explain who I am. You'll know. You'll know. And you'll know that every day I'm trying to do it the best way I can for all of you. So I appreciate you coming tonight and spending the time. I really appreciate your questions. I'll see you.